this opportunity again to seek truth, to seek wisdom, and to just be guided by you. Father, fill us with your Spirit. Help us to divide the right from the wrong, Lord, and to pursue the life that you have for us, Lord. So just be here with us this night, and thank you for all that you do. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so, yes, we're going to talk about marijuana. Now, this came out of a topic that I had to sit down with a student and share with him because he came to me saying, I'm a Christian, and I smoke pot, and I don't think it's a big deal. And when it happened, I didn't have a lot of information, so it caused me to really search this information out for him, to really help guide him into why that's not just on a biblical level. Because the scriptural level, and we'll talk about that. I know Ryan has an amazing pamphlet on the biblical verses and reasons for being sober-minded and all that. But on a practical level, I felt like I wasn't equipped. So that was 2 years ago. So for the last 2 years, off and on, I've been doing a lot of research. And something about marijuana is that it's not easy to research because there's a lot of false information out there. There's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily know is wrong, but looks like legitimate information. And basically what it boils down to, and what I realized, is that there's a story. Okay? There's a story about a plant, and the story goes that this plant used to be pretty cool, but it used to be bad, and it's illegal, and it used to be considered a bad drug, and only people who were rebelling did it, right? But the story continues that now we found out that it's really not that bad, that in fact, it's not even a big deal. In fact, it can even be healthy. It can even be therapeutic. It can even be relaxing, and it can help people, and it can cure people from some diseases. And so now, the story is that this plant has a new persona, it has a new image, and somehow it's come off as this thing that is not a big deal. And that's the story that you and I are hearing right now. How many of you guys have heard that story? Pretty much all of us have heard the story that has changed. Because 20 years ago, that was not the story with this same exact plant. Okay? So there's a narrative going around. So is this narrative true? That's the question we need to look. We're at Truth Quest, so we want to find out. There's this story going around about this. Is that story correct? We hear a lot of things, and I threw a statistic up there. I'm going to have some random statistics, but that's from 2013. Only less than 40% of teens actually thought it was harmful, and every year since then, that percentage has decreased. Today, I couldn't find a 2017 statistic because it probably hasn't come out yet, but I would say it's probably down to 10, 20% of teens actually think that there's something wrong with marijuana. So that means 80%, I'm just guessing about that at that rate, 80% of kids your age in high school think there's no big deal. So you can see that it's actually the persona, and this story is actually taking root in our culture, and our culture is buying this story. We hear things like, it's a harmless plant, right? You guys heard that? It's all natural, right? Heard that one. It helps you relax. It's just calming, just calms your nerves. There's no real side effects. There are no side effects have been proven. They say there's bad side effects, but there's really not. It's even medicinal. It even cures cancer. For that one. It's not even addictive. You can do it and you can quit at any time. And at least it's better than alcohol. And you hear this one a lot, but alcohol-related deaths are way more than marijuana, and yet alcohol is legal and marijuana is not, so that doesn't make sense. We should legalize marijuana. So these are just some of the things you've heard. Anyone else heard anything else? Any other things that you've heard about marijuana that's similar to these that you might come to your head?
No death by marijuana.
No, yeah, that's one. We're going to talk about that. And actually it's not, what we're going to talk about, it's not no death by marijuana, it's that nobody overdoses on marijuana. You can't overdose on marijuana. Okay. Which is true. That's like saying you overdose on cigarettes. It's not an overdosable drug. There's no way to do it. So that is true in some sense. We're going to talk about that. But ultimately, this idea, all these things that we hear in this story, we have to ask ourselves, is it true? We have to ask ourselves, who's telling it, right? Not just, is it true or not, but who's feeding us the story? Because the source of a story is very important, right? Anyone have a crazy uncle or relative that always tells weird stories? We all have one. And you're like, sure, Uncle Bill, I'm sure you surfed a 25-foot wave yesterday. Yeah, okay. And then, the source, or if it's someone you respect and they say something that's amazing, you might believe them more. The source is very important. What's the science behind it? That's actually what we're going to look at most. It's going to be a lot of facts. I'm going to try not to be boring. I don't know. I've never done this one before. This is the first time I put all of this together. But there's a lot of science that we're going to look at. And then ultimately we need to answer, is the story true? Is the story that you guys are being fed about this plant true or not? That's what it comes down to. We're going to look at 4 areas, if you can read that. We're going to look at the lungs, what marijuana does to the lungs. We're going to look at what marijuana does to the heart. We're going to look at what marijuana does to the brain. Hopefully you guys have those. And we're going to look at marijuana and its addictions, if it's addictive. Okay? Those are the 4 main areas. And there's other areas involved, and we'll hit them hopefully a little bit, but those are the 4 main areas. So the first thing, the lungs. Now, I wrote up there, it's important for breathing. Just in case you didn't know, lungs are very important for breathing. How many of you guys, take a deep breath. Oh yeah, okay, let it out. It's good. It's good. You can do that every now and then anyways. And you guys were just playing scatterball. You guys definitely need lungs for that. What does marijuana do to the lungs? Because, as you can imagine, what's the main form that people do with marijuana? What's the main thing they do with marijuana? Smoke. What does smoke entail? Smoke, right? Smoke is something you breathe, and it's something you go into lungs. I just want to say off the bat that to say it has no effect on your lungs is stupid. Because anytime you breathe in anything other than CO2, it's going to have some kind of effect. Right? Oxygen is what we need to breathe, but anything else, not even dust, even outside playing and getting dust particles, is going to have some effect. Dust particles are nominal, it's not a big deal. But if we breathe in too much, we would start coughing. If you work in a coal mine, and you're like Zoolander, you ever seen that movie? I think I got the black lung cough. You get coughs. You can get, that's a real thing, the black lung. You can get that from working in coal mines. Anytime you breathe in foreign substance, it's going to do something to your lungs. So right off the bat, you can pretty much just common sense know that smoke is not going to be good for your lungs. The question is, how bad is it? Well, the first thing, I'm going to start small and work our way up, okay? On most of these, I'm going to start with the basic stuff, and then it's going to get worse. So, the first thing is that obviously it makes existing conditions worse. Does anyone have asthma? Or have partial asthma? You know a little bit? Does anyone ever had pneumonia ever? Okay? Has anyone ever had any other lung issues where you've had trouble breathing? Yeah? A lot of us, okay? Most people have had some kind of lung complication. Well, marijuana exacerbates or makes those things worse. Cannabis is known to exacerbate existing lung conditions. This is kind of common sense as well. For example, if you have asthma, marijuana smoke can cause asthma attack leading to hospitalization, even been recorded to lead to death. Right off there. So the very first thing is just, if you have asthma, right then and there, you probably shouldn't smoke cigarettes or marijuana. It can and has been known to cause death in some cases. And that's from the American Theatric Society, Thoracic. Is that it? Yeah, thoracic? Thoracic. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, Thoracic Society.
Jurassic.
Jurassic Park. Sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. So just off the bat, existing lung conditions obviously don't get better from putting smoke in your lungs. They get worse. The second one is tar deposits. Now, you guys know smoking cigarettes causes tar deposits, right? Yeah, everyone knows that. That's like common knowledge. Actually, we've known that for a long time. It's one of the reasons that people started realizing that smoking cigarettes wasn't good for you because, 50 years ago, the cartoons even smoked cigarettes and it wasn't a big deal. And we realized that after a couple years of that, you start coughing and we see people's lungs come out of their chest when they die, they're black, and we're like, oh man, maybe smoking's bad. So, same thing with marijuana. In fact, marijuana is 4 times worse with tar. If you smoke the same amount of marijuana as the same amount of tobacco, it will be 4 times as much deposits of tar. And one of the reasons is there's no filters. That's one reason. But it's also because you inhale deeper, and marijuana itself is a thicker consistency. It has more tar in it. So for every cigarette someone smokes, if they smoke marijuana the same amount, they're going to get 4 times the lung tar in their lungs. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my lungs to look like that. Either one of them would be bad enough. But 4 times. And this is something that's interesting because they could find this information. This one was easy to find. This is the first piece of information I really found when I started looking into the actual health conditions, issues with marijuana. But still people try to kind of push it under the rug and say, oh, it's not that bad. In fact, a lot of things they say is like, when you stop, it goes away, as opposed to cigarette smoke, which is kind of a myth and not necessarily proven and no science behind it. But the truth is, and this is repeated in like multiple articles I found, at least 4 times, some even said 5 times the amount of tar in your lungs. Okay. What about other respiratory problems? Of course, there's other things. Marijuana smoke is also an irritant in the lungs, and frequent marijuana smokers have had many of the same respiratory problems experienced by people who smoke tobacco. So anything that goes with smoking cigarettes, you can get with smoking marijuana, basically. And these include cough, philogen production, which is like that phlegm stuff, on most days, wheezing, bronchitis, and a greater risk of lung infection in general. That's from the American Lung Association. Something I wanted to say, I forgot to say at the beginning, is there's a lot of pseudoscience out there, and there's a lot of opinion articles, okay? So most of this information, if not all of it, I got from reputable scientific sources that I had to dig for. So I'm hoping to present to you guys with the most scientific stuff I can, because honestly, when you go and look, if you try to research this online, you're going to find a lot of opinions and a lot of kind of half science, half this is what I feel about it, snippets on YouTube and snippets on Facebook and op-eds, which is opinion editorials on websites. But this is from the American Lung Association. So this is people who have dedicated their lives to studying the lungs say that this is just as bad as smoking cigarettes, if not worse, because you have 4 times the tar. So anyone who says that marijuana is better than cigarettes is automatically not reading the real facts. There's this thing, and I can't pronounce it very well.
Pneumothorax.
What was it? You said it earlier, yeah. What?
Pneumothorax.
Pneumothorax, okay. I was going to say pneumothorax, but yes. Pneumothorax. Now, pneumothorax is actually smoking marijuana. What it does is it causes little air sacs in your lungs, called bullae, or however you want to say that, to develop in your lung, and they can cause a shortness of breath, and they can rupture or pop. So think of like little bubbles popping in your lungs, and the air leaking from the ruptured bubbles leads to a collapsed lung, and can potentially life-threatening condition called pneumothorax. And this is from another reputable American society, a thoracic society. And so you can actually get a condition where your lung can collapse. Now, none of these things mean that everyone who smokes marijuana is going to get all of them. These are just things that can't happen, obviously. So, but anyway you dice it, I don't want to take my chances with a collapsed lung, because then you're going to have surgery and maybe be down to even 1 lung, or have major surgery to try to get that lung back up. So, what else? Lung infections. Here's some more information. Marijuana smokers can develop a lung infection from a mold called, what is it?
Aspergillus.
Okay, I was going to say it's sort of different, but Aspergillus. I need to have you read this to me before. Aspergillus. So Aspergillus lives in marijuana plants. It literally lives on the plants, and what's entailed by the smoke, it's basically like a type of bacteria that causes pneumonia and even death. This stuff literally lives on these plants, and it causes lung infections and can cause death. And I don't know, that's probably not the best picture of it, but those ideas, these little bacteria and little things that live on the plant, there's basically a mold. Think of a mold, you know, you leave a piece of fruit out and it gets fuzzy and nasty. Think of that being on the plant that you smoke, it goes in your lungs and starts to grow on your lungs. That's basically what it's saying here. Some other information, this is from NBC News Health, which is definitely not for or pro, or definitely not against marijuana anyway. In fact, they have a lot of news where they try to spin it that it's good. But they actually admitted that some of the green buds they viewed in looking at marijuana under a microscope, that many of them were covered with fungus, different types of fungus. So this is a plant that this isn't going through a food processing scenario where they clean it and wash it and prepare it properly and package it and sell it to you in a store in a nice clean package, and it's FDA approved and you can bet that it's safe. This is stuff that is going through someone's dirty backyard sometimes and ending up in a little baggie and has fungus and mold on it that you can ingest into your lungs. Hopefully I'm grossing you guys out a little bit, because that's good. UCS Davis doctors say that dangerous bacteria, fungi, and mold can lurk on almost all pot. This is from the UCS Davis Department of Medical Microbiology from last year. That mold and fungus is almost on almost every plant they view. So, the last thing about lungs is, of course, the big question, lung cancer. Now, I do have to say that lung cancer hasn't been directly studied as much as a lot of things when it comes to marijuana. Tobacco smoke has been studied extensively when it comes to lung cancer, and we know that there are certain chemicals that cause lung cancer from tobacco. There has been enough research, though, to make it pretty obvious that it doesn't help lung cancer. In fact, marijuana smoke contains this is from two different sources. It contains over 450 unique chemicals, okay? Unique different chemicals in the plant, and 33 of those are known cancer-causing chemicals. So they keep saying that the research is not that conclusive, but if they know that there's 33 chemicals that have been known to cause cancer, then I think it's pretty safe to say that we know that marijuana can at least cause cancer. So even though everyone's kind of hesitant to really say it when you go and do the research, they're all saying it at the same time. They're like, there's a lot of chemicals in marijuana that can cause cancer, but we still need to do more research. But the point is, look, if there's 33 chemicals and they know they cause cancer, then the likelihood is that they probably will cause cancer. So it's pretty obvious that they can cause cancer. And that's from two different sources that both said that. And actually I found a couple more. And there's a couple variances. Some say 30. I've seen some that said 40 to 50 cancer-causing chemicals. The bottom line is some strands have more cancer-causing chemicals than others. And that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more, but let me mention that first too. There's different strains of marijuana. So it's a plant. It's grown by random people all over the world, and there's big money in it. So there's different strands. There's some that are really potent, some that are not as potent, some that have more chemicals, some that have less chemicals. And the bottom line is, if you are going to ever do this, you don't know what you're getting. That the common person doesn't know what they're getting and how they're getting it. So it can have a number of these things, it can have all of these things. And so it's really kind of a scary thing. It's not regulated in any way. You know, everyone points to tobacco being worse, but if you think about it, at least tobacco is regulated. Not that I ever want anyone to smoke cigarettes, but at least it has filters and it's regulated. In a way, if you really look at it, tobacco smoke and cigarettes are actually safer in almost every way than marijuana, although it still has so many damaging effects. So those are the lungs. Any questions about lungs? I'm going to take questions in the middle too, just in case if anyone has any. All right. Well, that's the lung. That's a cancer lung, if you could read, and that's a healthy lung. So which one do you want? Healthy lung, of course. The heart. Let's talk about the heart. This is an x-ray of my heart. I took it yesterday. I have an x-ray machine at home. I'm just kidding, that's a lie. That's not true. All right, so first off, dizziness and fainting. That's the most basic one. It's not that big of a deal when you think about it, but almost every single user pod that was interviewed for different research categories has reported at least a couple instances of dizziness or even fainting. In fact, there's been recorded deaths caused by fainting, and they are pretty sure it was caused by, they're not going to, sometimes like, well, it could have been other things, but for the most part, the common denominator is that person was high and had fainted and hit their head on the table and died, or whatever it may be. So falling, fainting, all those things. Cannabis, which is the scientific name, of course, for marijuana, can decrease the blood pressure. So what it does is your blood pressure gets low, and when your blood pressure gets low, you get less what to your brain? Oxygen and blood to your brain. And when you get less oxygen and blood to your brain, you get that feeling. That's why when you're on like a tilt-a-whirl, the blood kind of goes out of your head and you get dizzy. If you don't have enough oxygen in your brain, you pass out. You get dizzy. And so it causes low blood pressure. It also causes cerebral blood velocity to decrease, which is just how fast and how speedy your blood goes around your body, basically. Causing dizziness, fainting, falling, and even injury. So just that alone is kind of scary, because if you're going to faint, it's not a fun thing. Who's ever had a fainting spell, ever, for any reason? A lot of people do. Have you ever locked your knees on a... I can't remember one time I almost fainted because I had my knees locked, and I was on a stage in a choir as a kid. And they tell you not to do that. And I found out that I was almost going to pass out, and I had to start moving around. If you stand too long in one position and you're locked, you can lose circulation and you can faint. And I've seen that happen. It's not fun, and you don't know what's going to happen when you do. So that's just the first thing with your heart. But the major one that we're going to talk about is, of course, heart attack. Now, heart attack is normally caused, it's one of the number one killers in America, but it's normally caused by plaque buildup, by unhealthy lifestyle and stuff like that. But really, it can be caused by an increase in your blood, in your heart rate. And marijuana has been known, let's look at this, to raise your heart rate by as much as 20 to 100%. That means if your heart is beating, you know, whatever the normal rate is, what is it like? It's like, I forget, I looked it up. 85, yeah, 85 to 90 beats a minute or whatever. So it's under, you know, then all of a sudden your heart can race to like 160 beats a minute. Like your heart just starts racing. Have you guys ever drinking too many Monster Energy drinks or Red Bulls? Okay, that's a little idea of when you overdose on energy drinks, you get that heart, oh gosh, I better stop, better drink some water. It's that times double that, because I think, you know, normal energy drink only raises it by 10 or 15 beats. But you can get up to 100 times of a heartbeat when you're smoking marijuana. And it happens pretty instantly. The crazy thing about marijuana is it has a chemical we're going to talk about called THC that enters your bloodstream very quickly and takes hold of your brain very quickly, within minutes. So within a couple minutes of smoking, you can get a heart rate that goes 100% faster than you normally would have. And it can last up to 3 hours. So it's not just like it goes away. I mean, one joint can last 3 hours worth of heart rate. And it also says that one study estimated that marijuana use has a 4.8-fold increase in risk of heart attack. So, I mean, we're not just talking about like a little bit of an increase, we're a 4.8 increase, which is a big increase in your potential to have a heart attack on the first hour of smoking. When you first start, it's when you get the biggest rush of that THC, and it can cause major heart attack. And there has been many recorded cases of people dying from heart attack, and the correlation is that they smoke pot. The problem is, you don't see it talked about a lot, and they try to say, oh, well, there was other issues, but usually it's the trigger that causes the heart attack is smoking pot. And how many of you guys have ever heard of arterial fibrillation, or AFib? Ever heard of that? Yeah? What is it? Do you know? You've heard of it, but do you remember what it was?
No, I remember you.
Okay, so what it is when your heart doesn't beat properly. It like flutters, like it has a beat and then a half a beat, and then a beat and then a half a beat. There's a picture of a normal heartbeat. You know, normal, and then the AFib is like, oh, who to beat? Wait, no, gotta beat. You know, it's kind of off, and it's not being properly. It's actually a condition that people can get for many different reasons, health reasons, but marijuana has been shown to cause, and the International Journal of Clinical Practice has studied this, that compelling evidence is accumulating that cannabis has significant effects, I'm just going to go effect, I'm going to skip over that word, effects on the cardiovascular system, and it can lead to arterial fibrillation, a quivering or irregular heartbeat. And this is something that can cause a heart attack, of course, like we talked about, but it can also cause other issues in your health as well. And there's a whole list of things that AFib can fall into, and you can look at those if you want later. I'm not going to go into all of those. This one, blood pressure or blood flow and red eye. How many of you guys have ever wondered why people who smoke have red eyes? Okay, well here's why. Within a few minutes after inhaling marijuana smoke, an individual's heart rate increases, speeds up, we talked about that, and bronchial passages, which is what your blood flows through, relax and become enlarged, they blow up, and the blood vessels in the eyes expand. So the blood vessels in your eyes swell up and expand, and the blood vessels poke through, and that's why you get red eye. That's why you get people experience being very hot, like very warm when they first smoke, and it causes your bronchial passages to open up, and that's not necessarily. And that can cause a number of other health in general issues when your vessels do that, because they're not supposed to open up that quickly and have blood flowing through your body that fast in that way. So it can be a major problem. So that's the heart. Any questions about the heart? Good. All right. The brain. Now this is the one we're going to spend the most time on, because this is the one that marijuana affects the most. So your brain, it's your command center. You definitely need it. How many of you guys have a brain? Raise your hand. You guys have a brain. Okay, good. Just making sure. Okay, just want to make sure we all have brains. THC. THC is the main carcinogenic or chemical, I guess you would say, in marijuana. Have you guys ever heard the THC? Okay, you've heard of it? Anyone not heard of THC? So, the technical name is called delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinoid, or cannabinoid, sorry. Tetrahydrocannabinoid. Try to say that 5 times fast. But basically what it does is it hijacks your nervous system. So there's a picture of a synapse in your brain. You have nerves, and they send electrical charges between each other when things are happening. When you're thinking, doing, memorizing, whatever you're doing, those synapses talk to each other, right? And what marijuana does is THC latches on, that's what that green splotch is, latches on and kind of hijacks your nervous system and overloads it. And starts rapidly sending those and not regulating how many signals are being sent. So you get a stimulation and an increase in that neuron activity. Basically, it increases your neuron receptors, and it disrupts the natural flow from your brain to your body. It's messing up the communication from your head to the rest of your body. And alcohol has a similar effect in some ways. Other drugs do this too. This is not something completely just something that marijuana does, but THC specifically is one of the strongest chemicals that does this to your neurons out of any drug. Now, marijuana contains the potent chemical, the tetrahydrocannabinoid, more commonly known as THC. It's very similar to chemicals in the brain that naturally produce. So your brain actually produces a chemical similar to THC, but it regulates it. It produces it on a level that is needed, on a God-given design level. And so when you add a bunch of fake version of that in there, you're basically overloading the system. Think of it like this. If you drink a root beer, right, and it has that sweet vanilla root beer flavor, but then I came along and literally took one of those diner shop, sugar containers, the glass ones, and just dumped all the sugar and stirred it in and then gave it to you, again, would it taste good? No, because I'm overloading it with sugar, right? I'm overloading it with the chemical that's supposed to naturally... Root beer naturally has a lot of sugar, but if I just dump a huge thing in there, it's going to be disgusting. It's going to be too much. It's going to overload. You're not going to like it. It's going to actually be horrible, and you're not going to want to drink it. It's kind of like that. It's overloading your nervous system with too much of the chemical that your brain needs. So basically what happens is this stuff gets a hold of your brain, and it can really mess things up. I have a couple other things that I didn't get to fit in the slide, but basically it says that cannabinoid administration, it acutely alters multiple hormonal systems. So multiple systems that regulate your body, it interrupts multiple systems at the same time, including the suppression of steroids, growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid hormone, which regulates your metabolism and your appetite, the activation of, that's why stoners are always hungry, and it affects the medicated, or effects are medicated and binding to a cannabinoid receptor near the hypothalamus, which is like the inner part of your brain that controls almost all of your thought, memory, and motor skills. So basically, it messes with the major functions of your body, not just like some side functions, but the major functions of your body. In fact, one of the issues is reasoning and motor skills. If you've ever seen someone who's high, then you would know that their motor skills and their reasoning aren't always the best. Marijuana affects your perceptions. So you perceive things differently and not accurately. We're talking about truth at Truth Quest. When you're on a drug like this, you don't perceive the truth the right way. That's the, oh, look at my hand. Wow, so that's not truth. You're looking at something that's normal and thinking it's something that's different. It alters your coordination. It's kind of like why cops give sobriety tests when they pull someone over to see if they're drunk, because the alcohol does the same thing. Well, THC does the same thing. It alters your coordination, your motor skills, and your reaction time. You're very slow in your reaction time. Your motor skills, you're not able to really coordinate what your body's doing with your brain. So there's a documentary that I watched and took some notes from, as well as articles. And I'm going to show a couple clips. This is one of 3 clips I'm going to show. But what happens in this clip, I'm going to set it up, because I didn't want to put the whole thing in here. But these kids eat some hot brownies or cookies. And it goes into their system, they go hiking, and it doesn't go in right away, because when you eat it, it takes a little bit longer to get in your system. So they go hiking out in the woods, they cross this little creek, it's about as wide as this table, and they go out, and they're coming back, and it's starting to kick in. They get to the same creek, and it takes them an hour to get across it. An hour to get across this tiny creek. They walk up to it, and they think it's a gorge. They think it's a canyon. They're trying to figure out how in the world they can cross this tiny creek. And this is just a clip of the last part of that when they try to cross this creek.
We were going to get across it. We did.
THC also hijacks messages to the part of their brain that controls balance and coordination.
Just jump on it. Jump. Just jump.
So even when they picture a smooth leap in their mind, the message just can't get through to their body.
Put one up and then spring off.
Eventually, the guys make it across.
Made it.
In one piece.
Sick. We did it.
Cannabis disrupts the flow of information between our brain and our body. And that's
So, I don't know if you saw the creek. You probably didn't because it's so small. It's literally this little grass, tiny stream. And they get up to it, and that's, an edited version of them taking an hour to try to get across this thing. That's how bad it hijacks your brain. They literally almost fell taking one step over a tiny creek. And it's kind of sad, but when you're kids, you think it's funny. Like, oh, it's funny you couldn't get across the creek with your friends. But really, the truth is, that's sad because what can happen, and most marijuana-related deaths are caused by accidents and people doing things that they think they can do and they have no idea what's going on. It transports you into a place where you're not really there. And that can be very dangerous on the immediate level and on the future level if you keep doing it. What about mood change and depression? This is another major issue with marijuana. One of the biggest ones. Consistent use of marijuana can absolutely cause major adverse effects. Found among, they tested 268 cannabis users, and most common adverse effects were feelings of anxiety, paranoia, and depression. Look at 21% of those people had depression. That's a big number for a small test group. Depression tendencies and low motivation. Of course, makes you lazy. That's definitely a stereotype. That's true. So, and the thing about this is, these things can get worse because they're psychological, not just physical. So anybody, you guys know that anybody can struggle with depression. We're flawed humans, and at times we get sad, right? And we get down on ourselves, and we can struggle with depression. Even completely sober person, even a believer in the Lord and someone who's strong and following God can get depressed at times. It can happen. When you add a stimulant like this that causes and exacerbates that depression, what it does is it pushes you towards that more. And even when you're not taking it, you can still fall into a more depressive state because it kind of pushes you more towards it. So it's one of those things where it's not just when you're taking it that you can fall into these, but it can lead you into a life where you start to seclude yourself, where you start to separate from people, and you have social anxiety, and you start to be removed, and you start to get paranoid in general, and then next thing you know, you're not even smoking marijuana, and you're still getting paranoid about things, because it's caused that start in your psyche. And the start in your psyche can continue without any help from a drug. So it's one of those things where it may not always be the direct cause, but it can make it 10 times worse and cause you to do that permanently in your life and have that struggle with depression or anxiety or paranoia, or even schizophrenia. I think I talk about that later. And what gets even worse is that it can cause delusions and paranoia. Not just depression and not just anxiety, because anxiety and depression are normal things that everybody experiences a little of. You still don't want them, but they're things that everyone struggles with. Now, delusions and paranoia are not. It is not normal for us as humans to have delusions all the time. And delusions mean you think something happening that's not happening. Like, I think there's a pink elephant in this room. Oh my gosh, look at it back there. If I started doing that, you would need to check me into a psychiatrist and get me checked out, because I would be having delusions. That's not true. I'm coming up with something that's completely false. And so that is not normal for any human to really have. If somebody has delusions, there's something major going on. And pot and marijuana has been known to cause major delusions and paranoia. It has been linked to the development of long and short-term delusions, paranoia, and even schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is a long-term condition where you're basically out of your mind. It's someone who is completely gone to a place where they're making up almost everything about their life. Schizophrenia, the biggest sign, is not Alzheimer's. That's where you lose memory, it's deterioration. It's where you have your brain, but you're using it to think that things are happening, or you have multiple personalities. That's part of schizophrenia. You think that you're 4 different people at different times, and you believe that's true. That's part of schizophrenia. It can have a number of different forms, but it's basically the definition of insane. When you say someone's insane or they're crazy, it's schizophrenia is the biggest one that can do it. And the chemical THC, when it hijacks your brain, if there's high enough levels, it can definitely cause paranoia, delusions, and schizophrenia in a patient. Now I'm going to show you another clip, and this girl, she went in to test the effects of different marijuanas, and they tested an effect of one that had a higher THC, which has actually been projected to be a normal rate now that's being legalized. THC has gone up, and CBD, which is another chemical we're going to talk about, has gone down. And so they tested on her, and just watch what happens. And she's never had this before, but this is the first time taking this particular strand of marijuana, and this is the first time she's ever had these reactions.
Having visions that you think others are not able to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. What sort of thing?
I feel like parallel to this situation, there's another situation going on, which is a dream.
So,
She's experiencing a disconnection with reality.
have you been receiving any special messages from people, or from the way things are arranged around you?
Yes.
What sort of special messages?
I feel like I've got some sort of communication going on, like a conversation with my boyfriend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what do you
Parallel to
think?
this one.
So some sort of telepathic type communication?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
Special.
Special. Okay. So Catherine had what we would say was an actual psychotic reaction. So she thought she could communicate telepathically with her boyfriend, who was outside the lab, and she thought she was simultaneously experiencing 2 different realities. You think you're being talked about?
3.
You're experiencing something very special.
All right, so she's rating the mouse schizophrenia. You notice what she said, though. She's experiencing 2 different realities. So there's 2 things going on that she thinks are 100% real. She's also completely convinced that she can telepathically communicate to her boyfriend who's not in the room. That's scary, guys. That's intense. And this wasn't like they gave her some crazy drug. This is just this is a strand of marijuana that you could find on the streets anywhere. That's the scary thing. And they were testing the different levels, and this is just one of the normal levels that's out there. And it caused her to have a complete psychotic episode and a schizophrenic moment where she literally thought she could be telepathic with her boyfriend. And they test her later, and she has no memory of the testing that went on. So, and we're going to talk about memory loss in a minute, but she also doesn't recall that she even did this. But she absolutely, and you notice how she said, oh, I feel special. It feels cool that I can talk to my boyfriend. She didn't even doubt herself for a minute. You know? Sometimes when we have moments where we get crazy, we at least doubt ourselves, like, oh, okay, yeah, I can't really be doing that. She doesn't doubt herself. She's completely convinced that she's having another conversation and another reality with her boyfriend. Now, that moves us on to the next one, impaired memory. Like I said, she didn't remember any of that conversation. Smoking pot can lead to, I forget. Memory impairment from marijuana use occurs in THC after it alters how information is processed. So because it's hijacking your brain, it's altering how you remember things. So literally, it's blocking memories from being made half the time. So most people who use marijuana don't remember what they did when they were using it. Now, if you were an alcoholic, that would be called getting blackout drunk. But it only takes one joint to do that to your brain, as opposed to an entire bottle of something else. So it's actually, in this regard, worse than alcohol, worse than a lot of things, because you can completely forget what you did. And you don't want to forget things that you do, because you can do a lot of bad things and not even know, and that's a very scary place to be. There's all kinds of stuff you can find about people who committed horrible crimes when they were high and didn't even know, and went to jail because of it and didn't even know what they did. That's a scary thing. Now, some of the reports say that you gain your memory back when you stop using, and that's kind of debatable. Some say you do, some say you don't. The point is, if you lost the memory while using, you never get that back because you never had it. It blocks it while you're using. While you're using, you can block memories, and those you'll never get back. So those are long-term. Now, We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I just want to mention that this particular issue, along with most of these issues, are a lot worse for teens who are under 24 years old or so. Because, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but you guys have developing brains that are still growing and still expanding, and so this can actually, in this case, they have known recorded, I think I have written down here, that permanent memory loss has been recorded in teens who started smoking marijuana before the age of 24 or so. Yeah, I don't have that quoting here, it's in that article. Now, loss of IQ. This is very debatable. A lot of people say, oh, no, you don't lose IQ. But I've actually found a lot of statistics that prove that to be wrong. Marijuana, in fact, has results of a large, I found a large longitudinal study that conducted in New Zealand, which found that frequent and present marijuana use, starting in adolescence in particular, teenage years, was associated with loss of an average of 8 IQ points. Now, I don't know if you know anything about IQ, but 8 points is a big gap. That's like going from an A average to like a D- average. 8 points, 8 IQ points is a huge amount of loss in your IQ. Your IQ is your intelligent quotient. Your how you handle problems, how you react to problems, how smart that you, not how smart you are as in book knowledge, but how smart you are as in you're able to solve problems. IQ points are very important. And that was the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the NIDA. Now, as people age, right, they lose neurons in their hippocampus, which is the brain part. That's why when you get older, you get a little slower, and sometimes you get Alzheimer's and stuff like that, which decreases your ability to learn new information, right? So the older you get, the older your brain gets and gets tired, you actually start to lose the ability to gain new information. But chronic THC exposure hastens that loss in the neurons, and in one study, they actually studied rats to control it. They exposed rats to this THC every day for 8 months, okay, which is approximately 30% of a rat's life. So for 30% of a rat's life, they exposed it to THC, and it showed a level of nerve cell loss at a huge number of nerve cell loss, and then at 11 to 12 months of age, that equaled the same exposure of a mice twice their age. So basically, these mice that they exposed to THC lost their brain twice as fast as the mice they did expose to this. Their brain literally deteriorated twice as fast. So let's say you're going to live to be 90. Let's just be generous. 90. I mean, let's just say 100. That's a good age. I would love to die at 100. Nice round number, nice and old. Let's say I live to 100. Okay, that means my brain is going to deteriorate from the time I'm born to the time I'm 100 at a certain rate, right? It's gonna get older and older, and by the time I'm 100, I'm gonna be like, where am I? Okay, cool, let's go to my birthday, right? Whatever. I don't know where I am, I'm getting really old. Your brain slowly deteriorates. Think of that it would be 50% more, so I would be dead by the time I'm 50. Or if I live to be, let's say I live to be 80, which is still a good age, that means my brain would be deteriorated completely by the time I'm 40, if I did marijuana 30% of my life. That's not even my whole life, just 30% of my life. So like, let's just say for 15 years, 20 years, it would cause my brain to deteriorate at twice the rate. That's what they found in this study. It's pretty amazing. So to say that it doesn't lower your IQ, the truth is, you can test someone's IQ, they can smoke pot for a couple years, you can test it again, it could be the same. It might not. Okay? But the point is, it does cause brain deterioration. So if you start it too early, especially when your brain's developing as a teenager, it is much more likely to cause a loss of intelligence and a loss of IQ. So it can make you dumb. What about nerve damage? Brain nerve damage. Smoking high-strength cannabis may damage nerve fibers in the brain. Studies suggest that high levels of use may affect the brain's white matter, which is the bulk of your brain, making communication between the right and left hemispheres, the two halves of your brain, less efficient. You're less able to talk to your brain on the two halves, what you need to do constantly to solve problems and to have conversations and to do any basic stuff. You have to be able to communicate with the two hemispheres. And it can cause a major loss of communication between those two hemispheres. I also have one where, I didn't put this slide in there, but there was one study I found that it said they literally measured that a brain shrank by a nominal percent, but there was shrinkage in the brain where the brain actually got smaller. Now, it was one of very few studies I found. There were some other studies that kind of hinted towards it, and it hasn't been researched that much. So there might be more research about that in the future, but it looks like they're starting to find out that the actual mass of someone's brain who's on THC for a long period of time can actually shrink. So it literally is making your brain smaller, which is kind of a scary thing. It also, like I said, I mentioned this before, but I was going to get into this more. It stunts on young developing brains. This is a picture of a girl who went into a full coma and has yet to ever recover. She's now paralyzed from the neck down because she had a THC overload. She had a strand that was too strong and it caused her brain to start shutting down. And there's a whole article about it, but basically this is just one example of a developing brain adversely reacting to marijuana because they're way more sensitive than an adult brain. Your brains are still growing. You guys haven't gotten there yet. In fact, they say 24 to 25 is when your brain actually is completely grown into itself, and you still learn, but to where it's completely developed. And in fact, your frontal cortex is still developing, and that's the main center where you make your decisions and rationale. That's why teenagers are crazier than adults, because they haven't developed all of their reasoning in their frontal lobe yet. And so what happens is when you smoke marijuana and the THC gets in there, it's going to stunt that natural growth that you would have had, and that's a permanent effect. So every study, literally every study I read, said that all of these symptoms are much worse when it comes to an adolescent developing brain. Doesn't mean that it's good when you're an adult to do it, it just means that it's worse when you're young that you can do it. And notice it says substantial evidence, there's a lot of it, from animal research, because they did the same thing with rats, they watched their brains grow, and a growing number of studies among humans, so also indicate that marijuana exposure during the developing can cause long-term, permanent, and possibly permanent adverse changes in the brain. It can affect your brain forever, and it never comes back. That's permanent. And almost every medical journal agreed with the adolescent brain issue, that it's not a good idea. That causes permanent damage. So it's particularly important for you guys whose brains are still developing. Now, that's most of the health issues, at least all the big ones. And there's a couple other ones. I was telling Ryan, there's one about this weird stomach thing that people were going to the hospital about convulsively throwing up and not being able to figure out why they were throwing up. And then they found out that the common denominator was all these people had smoked marijuana and they didn't know what it was. And there's another study about, there was this, I forget what it was. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. But there's other little articles about health issues. So there's more than just what I talked about. But these are the main ones. Now the question is, okay, but is it addictive? Is this something that I can get hooked on, or is this something that, if I do it once and I don't have these issues, I can, not worry about it because I'm not going to get addicted? Is marijuana, is there an addiction problem there? Can I get hooked on this stuff? And unfortunately, most people try to say that you cannot. But when you really do the research, and you really have to look at it, it's obvious that you can. In fact, on a practical level, this is not research, this is just real life here. You guys can get addicted to anything. You can get addicted to cheeseburgers if you want. Addiction, the definition of addiction, is not chemical based, it's psychological based. Have you ever seen the show, My Strange Addiction? That was a weird show on the History Channel. There was people that were addicted to eating couch cushions. Okay? Did couch cushions have an addictive property to them? No. The lady, for whatever reason, used it as a comfort for something that was traumatic in her life, probably, and she started doing it as like a habitual thing, and she got addicted to that. She would unzip couch cushions, pull up the fluff or the foam, and peel off pieces of foam and eat them all day long. She went through multiple couches. And that's one of the craziest examples. But right there, my point is, you can be addicted to anything. So first of all, right off the bat, I think we can say that definitely marijuana could be addictive, right? And then you add up some other things on. So let's look at these other things. So yes, it can be very addictive. It actually, if you really do the research, about 2.7 million people in America meet the criteria for addiction to marijuana dependence. 2.7 million. This is a conservative number from a couple years ago. It's probably a lot higher than that. meet the criteria for addiction, okay? And this is one of the things I really want, because so many people are lying about this fact, pretending that it's not addictive. The THC, like we talked about, stimulates the brain cells and causes dopamine, which makes you feel good, right? You get a little bit of dopamine when you eat a good hamburger, for example. You get a little bit of dopamine when you get excited about something coming up that you want to do really bad. You get a little bit of dopamine when you get to come to youth group and hear Ryan, right?
Yeah.
It's your brain's motivation. It gives you this little stimulus, right? When you smoke marijuana, it hijacks your brain. It gives you a bunch of dopamine. So it feels good, right? So people do it. If it didn't feel good, people wouldn't do it. It gives you that. But of course, anything that gives you a dopamine shot is going to become addictive. It's going to easily become addictive because that feels good. So it's going to be easily addicting, which creates a euphoric feeling and leads to physical addiction. Similar to tobacco withdrawal, people say that trying to quit marijuana reported irritability, sleeping difficulties, cravings, and anxiety. I have another, and of course, it's even worse for teens. Those who start young are about 17% or 1 in 6 of a likelihood of being addicted. 1 in 6. How many kids are in here? About 12. So 2 of you, if you started it, would be addicted instantly. Okay? So, I mean, 1 in 6 can get addicted. And among those who use it regularly, that's casual use, among those who use it regularly, it says 25 to 50%. So if we all started using it on a regular basis, half of us would be addicted for life and have a lifelong battle with trying to quit. So it's absolutely addictive. In fact, I want to show you this clip. And in this clip, this is the last clip I have, there's a guy who's an everyday smoker who's asked if he's addictive, and this is his answer. And then there's another guy afterwards who is honest about the fact that he was addicted and he got through it.
And the more he uses, the more he needs to use to feel its pleasurable effects. So the big question is it addictive?
Went on vacation to Europe, and I didn't bring any with me, and I didn't get any there, and I literally, even though I tried to drinking a bottle of wine at night, made no difference. Did not sleep a wink for 10 days. Insomnia, stomach, nauseous. But, so I guess technically, yes, I would say I am addicted to pot, but there are so many people on so much more worse things. I actually have to put this away or I will continue to smoke it. I could become a pro.
Okay, sure.
But over in California, landscape designer Tom Stout has no illusions about his relationship with marijuana.
I was addicted. On a scale from 1 to 10, I was definitely a 10. Couldn't stop. I think it was on
That's the dog. This is a bad clip. But you notice what the guy said? He said, what did he say? He said, well, first they said, notice he said, the more you start using it, the more you have to use it to get that high. And he said, when I went to Europe, I didn't bring it with me. For 10 days, I didn't sleep. I guess technically I'm addicted. He's almost trying to convince himself that he's not, when he didn't sleep for 10 days because he didn't have it. I mean, come on. If that's not addiction, I don't know what is. And then he said, well, people are on worse things. And that's those excuses, those lies that people tell themselves, that people try to tell you that it's not a big deal, when it absolutely is a very, very dangerous thing. Now, this next section, not the last section, hold on. I want to talk about medication. Okay, so you guys have all heard that marijuana can be used as medication, right? Yeah. You guys have heard that, right? We all know that. So what do we do with that? If it's used for medication, then there has to be some good in it, right? There has to be something good about it. I mean, it can't be all bad. Well, I want you guys to know there is a huge, huge difference between recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is whole leaf and whole plant usually, and it contains a high level of what's called CBD and a low level of THC. Most marijuana that's recreational almost has no CBD and it's almost all THC. They're very, very different things when it comes to real true medical marijuana versus recreational. And that's just to start off, okay? So basically the CBD is called cannabinoid, it's a cannabinoid chemical, and it can treat seizures, is actually the biggest example of that. It can treat seizures, and it causes a non-physical reaction and is primarily responsible for pain relief and calming of nerves. So it's kind of the opposite of THC. So there's two chemicals, there's CBD and THC, and they're kind of the opposite, and they kind of work against each other. So there's two big, huge differences, okay? I put it up here, but basically, medical marijuana is usually oil, like hemp oil or marijuana oil, and taken in an oil form, or whole plant ingested in some way, not necessarily smoked, okay? Although it can be. But look, it contains 21% cannabinoid, CBD, which is the one that calms you down. That's actually fine, has no side effects, and about 1% THC. Look at that. Then, recreational marijuana has between 10 to 18%. I found some studies that said 24%. It's starting to go up. In fact, it's gone up every year in the last 20 years. In the 60s, when hippies were smoking marijuana, it was like 5% THC, which is the chemical that's really bad for you. And it's gone up to 10 to 18, sometimes 25%, and usually less than either 0 to 0.3% of CBD. That's the difference between a recreational marijuana that you'll buy at the shop versus the actual medical stuff if you really search. And you have to search it. If you go into a medical marijuana shop and you have a card because you have seizures and you just ask for one, they're just going to say, hey, how do you like it? Do you like it real strong or kind of strong? And they'll just give you one. They're not going to give you, you have to actually search out and find special growers to get the marijuana that has the high CBD and almost no THC. It's a very specific thing. It's actually very hard to get. There was a whole documentary about a girl who had tons of seizures, and their parents, he was a military man, he wasn't allowed to touch pot or he'd lose his career, and he went out of his way to find the high CBD, and it took him a long time to find the right strand from the right grower. And even then, here's the crazy part, even then, there are still side effects. It's still not a perfect cure. That to me is the craziest part, because you think, okay, well, so there's some marijuana that exists out there that's perfectly healthy, and it's not. It's healthier, but it's still not perfectly healthy. In fact, the word marijuana usually, where'd it go? I lost my thing. There was a study from, oh yeah, here it is. There's still, the American Epilepsy Foundation said that when you use these oils that have high CBD and low THC, there was still a possible side effect where it actually caused epilepsy to last for days. So there was actually this adverse side effect that some patients found that actually caused them to have more seizures. So even in the case where you have the most medical version of marijuana, it can actually cause side effects. And that's the foundation, Epilepsy Foundation, which studies this the most. And that's one of the biggest places where it's being used to treat chronic illness. Now, what about relaxation? Some people say it treats relaxation, it calms you down. Well, there's actually been a lot of studies that say that the problem is that it causes temporary drowsiness. It's true. It makes you tired and kind of slow, right? And so people use it, oh, it relaxes me. It's kind of like a sleep aid, right? The problem is when it was studied to help you sleep, marijuana use and withdrawal from regular use has been shown to cause sleep problems that may last for weeks without stopping. So the problem is if you take this to try to sleep and then you stop taking it, it can actually cause you twice as much problems because now you become dependent on it for sleep. So it actually has an adverse effect. The problem is that we shouldn't be thinking of marijuana in general as medical. It's not. Even the most medical version of it has side effects. It's not supposed to be medical. It's not necessarily needs to be medical, and it can be used in some cases. And look, I'm not going to go say that anyone who uses it shouldn't be. There's some people that in extreme cases, maybe it's better than having the seizures or whatever, but it's not healthy. The narrative is that somehow it's healthy, and I think this kind of shows that in general, it's not healthy. Even the healthiest strand you can find can have adverse effects. What about cancer? You guys ever heard someone say that it cures cancer? I had my aunt tell me that. There's absolutely zero research to prove that it causes that cures cancer. Zero. Not even one. You can't find it. You will not find it anywhere. The Cancer Society itself claims that cannabis has no efficacy as a cancer treatment and is unsupported by evidence. That's their official stance on marijuana. The American Cancer Society. They have no official stance and is unsupported by evidence. Here's the thing. It can temporarily numb pain, and it can temporarily reduce some inflammation in cancer patients. So what happened is some cancer patients have taken it and felt a little bit better. And so this propaganda about it being a cancer cure has kind of come out, but really it's not a cure in any way. In fact, if we found the cure to cancer, everybody would know. I mean, we'd be, hopefully we'd be using that to actually cure people with cancer. So no, it's not a cure for cancer. The American Cancer Society Action Network has not taken, that's another cancer network, has not taken an official position on legalizing of marijuana for medical purposes because it says that it needs more scientific research. So this cancer society is not even pushing legalization of marijuana. It's not the medical people who are pushing it, guys. It's the pro-marijuana people who are making tons of money, and that's where we get into our next thing. The last section I want to talk about, or second to last, this is the last part of this, is propaganda. Now, what is propaganda? You guys know what that is? Not the rapper.
Campaign.
Campaign, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's a campaign. It's a campaign of ideas to try to convince people of something, right? It can be good, it can be bad, but basically it's who's telling the story, okay? Who's telling the story about marijuana being healthy? Well, you follow the money, you find the story. It's people who are making millions off of marijuana. That's who it is. It's the people who want to enslave you and I to make money off of us. That's who's pushing this. Not the medical community, not health nuts. It's the people making all the money. And look, it's doing really well. Doing better than milk, better than grapes, and better than almonds. I don't know what that says, but I guess almonds are pretty good. So I don't know why almonds and grapes are up there, but it's doing better than milk. That's pretty surprising because a lot of people I know drink milk or buy milk. Here's the funny thing. You mentioned that you can't overdose on marijuana. So what happens is something like that. The people who are making money on marijuana will spin that with a video that says, oh, no one's ever overdosed on marijuana, but everybody died. So many people here died in alcohol-related crashes, and yet alcohol is legal and marijuana is not. You should legalize it. And people are like, yeah, that makes sense. But the truth is, there's a lot of people who die from marijuana. They just don't overdose on it. Like I said, it's not overdosable. It's not a type of drug that you can. I guess you could. That one girl did go into a coma because she had a certain strand, but it's not normally a type of drug. It's like saying you ate too many brownies and died. You know, it's not physically, the way it's formed isn't really overdosable. So they use that and they spin it to try to tell you that you can't die from it. But the truth is, a lot of people die from it. A lot of people die from accidents. Driving-related accidents have like quadrupled in the last 2 years. Driving while under the influence. The problem is the statistics aren't very accurate because the cops don't have machines to test THC levels on the spot. They have machine alcoholizers to test your breath and see how much alcohol content you have, but they have yet to implement THC. In fact, they're talking about that. Colorado is talking about implementing a THC detector just like a breathalyzer to find out, because they're having such a problem with people driving while impaired under marijuana and crashing and dying and hurting other people that they're talking about having a breathalyzer for, basically, a breathalyzer for marijuana. I think it would be actually a blood shot, but, or whatever, a blood sample. Here's one. This is one. So, here's an example. There's an online editorial called The Cannabist, which, of course, right there, you know they're kind of skewed, right? And this op-ed, which is an opinion editorial, had a headline. And the headline was, marijuana-related deaths happen, but not in the way you probably expect. And you go, huh. You click on it, and the whole article is how a kid who had pot on him tried to illegally rob a store, and the cops found him, and they got an altercation, and he got shot by the cops. And their whole article basically is trying to convince you that if we legalize marijuana, less people would get shot by cops, and so most people who have marijuana die because it's illegal. Do you see the spinning there? Do you see the, it's like twisting? Okay, that's not the truth. The headline is, most people, basically they're trying to say that people die because it's illegal and it should be legalized. Totally try to, and people are sharing this article saying, yeah, if we legalized it, we'd be safer. If we legalized it, cops wouldn't shoot kids for having it on them. well, the kid shouldn't have been doing something stupid. It had nothing to do with the pot. And the truth is, lots of people are being hospitalized and having major health issues and even dying from marijuana, not just the way they wanted to see. So it completely ignores the health issues. It completely ignores the causes of death caused by intoxication, bad judgment, or driving under the influence, which is similar to alcohol. But when you talk about alcohol, you don't ignore those facts. You don't say, oh, the car killed the guy. No, you say he was drunk. It's basically saying like, oh, if someone crashed on high on marijuana, the car killed him, not the pot. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to spin to say that there's no marijuana-related deaths. So, I think we can all agree it's pretty unhealthy. So, abstaining. What are the reasons to abstain and just stay away from it? 3, I talked about the health reasons. That was my main point tonight. I spent most of my time on that because I think it's just good information and we don't get it a lot, and I know I have to do a lot of research, so I wanted to share that with you. But there's also 2 other reasons that are very important. Moral, in general, marijuana is very likely to lead to other drugs and crimes. It's just true. It's not a stereotype, it's truth. If you don't know what you're doing when you're high, you might commit a crime. If you start smoking, you might want a bigger high and move on to another drug. It's going to cause moral decay in your life. But of course, the last reason and the most important reason I'm going to close with is the biblical reason. And a lot of this Ryan's talked about, so I'm just going to put it up real quick. No, marijuana is not in the Bible. But neither are handguns, and I'm pretty sure we can all agree that shooting your neighbor is on principle biblical not to do, right? So it's the same idea. People try to bring this up. Marijuana is not in the Bible. In fact, they try to bring up that actually if it is, it's about God creating everything great in the Garden of Eden. They try to bring up some verse like that. The point is, on principle, we are to be sober-minded. As Christians, it's so important to keep our senses, to keep our minds clear, and to know what we're doing with our bodies, right? I just put up a couple. It's a sin to let any controlled substance control you, Ephesians 5:18. It's illegal, first of all. You have to be 21, just so you know. It is still illegal for you guys. So right off the bat, Romans 12, 1 and 2, you can read that. It can lead to laziness and a wasted life, which is a sin. Sloth is a sin. Proverbs 12:24 tells us, do not be lazy. It can rob you of your calling. I've seen this one happen in youth leaders that are working their way up, and then suddenly you lose their motivation, lose their calling, and God's calling them to do something great, and they're distracted by this thing that they think is just going to relax them a little bit, and it becomes their God. Colossians 3:23, guys. I didn't put up all the verses because it takes too long. Open to moral compromise. We talked about that. Ephesians 5:8 talks about not letting yourself be open to moral compromise. It dishonors a Christian body, right? Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Don't put smoke in God's temple. You know? You wouldn't go into your house and fill it with smoke from your fireplace. That would just make you cough. Don't do it. Corinthians talks about your body being the temple of the Holy Spirit. It impedes your ability to pray with a clear mind. You ever think of that? It's important to have your mind fresh, to have your mind clear, to pray, to read your word, to fellowship, to worship God, all those things. You have to have a clear mind to really get the most out of what God's trying to share with you. And it robs your ability to be effective witness of Christ. If you're a Christian, you're calling yourself a Christian, and you're dabbling in this kind of stuff, you've shot your credibility. Because the world's going to see that as either being a hypocrite or just you're not really a believer. Don't blow your witness over some weed that's grows from the ground that you probably should just get a weed whacker for. It's not worth it. And the truth is, you look at all this stuff we talked about tonight. What's the payoff if you did it? A temporary feeling better than you did a minute ago for maybe 2 minutes. That's it. Literally, that's the only pro. And it's not even much of a pro because it comes with all kinds of things immediately after. When you weigh it, the reason people usually start doing it is to fit in. Because your friends are doing it. And we've talked about this tonight. I talked about it in my Truth versus Imposters one. You guys, there's no reason to fit in. In fact, we shouldn't expect to fit in. We should stand out, be a light, be something better, be something greater, and encourage people to follow us into the light and to leave the things of darkness behind and to let God guide us and not a plant. I don't know about you, but when you say it, it sounds ridiculous. But people are letting a plant rule their life versus the God of the universe. So don't let that happen, and encourage people who are Christians who are struggling with this to seek the truth, to seek help and prayer, and to not let this become bondage. Because that's what it can become. And that's all I have. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time and for just this wealth of knowledge. And I know there's still much to know and to learn, but I thank you that you guide us, that you fill us with your Spirit to help us seek the truth. And I just pray that you give us strength. Lord, give us all the wisdom and courage to stand up for that things that are right, and to cast away the things that are a distraction. That we would focus only on you, Lord, that we would make you our greatest calling, and that we would just never take our eyes off to the left or the right, but just follow you straight ahead. We thank you for how much you love us, for your Son who died on the cross, and to give us grace and freedom and love and all the things that come with it, Lord. We just seek those things, and let us just pursue those with all of our heart. Thank you for this time tonight. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry if that was really intense. Okay, real quick. Any questions? Let's do any questions at all about any of this. Honestly, I know you guys have to have some questions. Yes.
Like when you have the whole schizophrenic thing,
Yeah.
as soon as that happens, is there any cure for that or any way for that to be helped?
So I think I read some that said there was temporary schizophrenia where people were schizophrenic while they were on it, and I think that's what the clip was. The girl, they talked about her a little bit later, and she come down from it, and she was fine, but she didn't remember it. So that was a temporary schizophrenia. But a lot of research is saying that it can lead to long-term schizophrenia, especially if you have a history of genetic schizophrenia in your family. So they warn if you have any history of people being schizophrenic in your family, that it's a huge risk for you to trigger you to become permanently schizophrenic. So it can do both. I think in most cases it's temporary. Like they think they're in two realities, but it's, when they get it out of the system, like in a couple hours or a week or whatever it is, they come back to normal. So it's not always permanent, but it can be permanent. Yeah, that's a good question. Anyone else?
Did you tell the other pastor? They said that it was marijuana about this.
The other pastor, what?
Did you tell him about that?
Oh, the guy that's helping him?
Yeah.
Or the kid that you were... Yeah.
Oh, the kid that came to my office? I actually haven't seen him in a while.
Oh.
It was 2 years ago. So he unfortunately chose pot over God. And I shared some of this with him. This is what I started. 3 or 4 of the articles I used in here are ones I printed off and gave to him and sat down with him and said, this is not healthy. I don't know what you're being told, but I found research that says it's very unhealthy, especially for a young brain. And he said, oh, I don't know. And he didn't really want to listen. So pray for him. There'll be a day when he's going to regret it. And I hope that turns him back to the Lord. Good question, though. Yeah. So I wish I had more of this information back then, but it took me a couple years to gather it all. Any other questions? Yeah, Josh?
Do you know who makes like more money between tobacco and
Marijuana is quickly taking over tobacco. I don't know what the exact numbers are. And it depends on how you look at it, like worldwide, cigar companies in Cuba, or just American cigarettes, or how you divide that up. But I know marijuana is quickly becoming one of the most profitable drugs in the entire world, period. It's actually kind of scary. And the strains they're producing are just worse and worse and more intense. Because what they're finding is that people who buy their products are going to keep wanting more and more intense stuff. So they keep making it harder, stronger and stronger. So it's going to get to a point where it just starts killing you.
I had a buddy who died a year ago, January, and he was a hardcore pothead, like live to smoke, smoke to live kind of deal. And he was 35 when he passed away. He was having seizures on a regular basis, and he ended up dying on, his dad found him on New Year's Day, and it was seizures. Basically what they think happened was seizures, heart failure. Because when they did they donated his body to science, but when they did the autopsy, his heart was enlarged, which is rapid heartbeat, and they were
AFib, yeah.
they went through everything and they tried to blame it on alcohol usage, marijuana usage, and drugs he had done prior in the past. But what he mainly did was just smoked all day long.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that, and it's hard to find real conclusive evidence for a couple reasons. The people who are making money are hiding it. The medical journals are scared to really call it what it is. They'll say, oh, it's a combination of things, or this, or it's heart failure, and it'll just be classified, in his case, might fall under heart failure. And someone who's researching the damaging effects of marijuana will never come across this case because it got categorized as heart failure instead of marijuana-caused heart failure. Because that's not really a thing. You don't categorize someone who died from a marijuana heart attack as a marijuana heart attack. You don't see that on the paperwork. It just says heart attack. So a lot of the deaths from marijuana aren't being recorded as marijuana deaths. They're being recorded as other things. So that's why people think that it's harmless a lot of times. It's kind of sad. And I found when I dug real deep, you would see that. Oh, well, yeah, I had this issue, but it probably was caused by marijuana, but we don't know. It could have just been a heart attack. It's like, well, they're a healthy 35-year-old. I mean, it is something. Yeah. Yeah.
You know how people say, or they say alcohol is not like a sin, only to get drunk on. Is it the same
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the alcohol in moderation debate, Jesus drink wine, alcohol moderation. Is it a sin? Why are you doing it? That's the question you ask. The question isn't ask what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. So, the only reason you really smoke marijuana is to get high, to hide something, to cover up your pain, or to really, there's another issue going on. So when anyone's smoking, there's really another issue. Alcohol is different. Alcohol is different. There are many cases where alcohol is absolutely fine. If you're a Christian and you're at a wedding and they toast with wine, you can have a sip of wine. You're celebrating someone's wedding. That's not illegal in the Bible, okay? Your heart, the motive, is in celebration and moderation of that person. I'm not saying you should. I don't drink any alcohol for my own personal reasons and because I'm a youth leader and I don't want to tempt any of you guys. So that's my personal choice. But it is absolutely not a sin to take a sip of wine at a wedding and celebrate someone getting married. But pot's a different thing. You don't do that. That's not why it gets used. It gets used out of much darker reasons and to cover things and to try to fit in and to do. So you always got to ask, what's the motive, right? That's really, God looks at the motive of the heart. He doesn't look at the exteriors. When he talks to the woman at the well who had 5 husbands, he's looking at her heart and talking to her heart. He's not looking at the surface of, oh, you've had 5 husbands, you're really promiscuous. He went through that to her heart. And I think that's what you got to do. So, wine can be very damaging. If you're going home and having a bottle of wine after work because you can't cope with life, you're in a problem, you're having a problem. So it just depends on the heart. Yeah. But that's a good question. And I don't know. I don't think there's any reason that marijuana would be something that's appropriate. I just can't imagine a situation where it makes sense. Especially with how addicting it can be and damaging effects. There's just no reason to really do that. And that's my opinion, I guess. That's a good question. Anyone else? And I'm not as many jokes in this one, sorry guys.
Yeah,
I'm a little serious. I'm like Debbie Downer tonight, man. We got more root beer in the back, right?
Yeah. I told Brian, I said that's how they should do the sobriety check. They should just tell a joke when you pull someone over.
See if people laugh.
Yes, see if they're scared.
How long it takes to get the joke?
Yeah. Like, oh, dude, that's funny.
Like the sloth in Zootopia?
Yeah.
All right, well, no other questions. If you have more, you know what? I'm going to be finalizing some of this information. Not all of it made into the presentation. Some of it's kind of scattered in here, I noticed, as I go through my notes, because this is like a rough draft of something that I've been working on for a while. But I'm planning on putting a formal present, like some kind of a packet or something that we can hand out, and Ryan and I will work on that, and we can get it to you guys. You can have it in your hand, look at the references, maybe some of the actual articles that I found, and you can use that to hopefully maybe help friends who are struggling with it. I wish I would have had that by now, but I just didn't have time to put it all together. It's been a lot of work. So,
Awesome.
Thank you. All right.